Hello and welcome to the Dinosaw for week 43, so another 7 curious interesting things I saw last week. As ever, let's crack on. First one, NASA have awarded a bunch of contracts very recently, and one of them really stood out, which was for Nokia. Remember them? They are still a big heavyweight in network communications, and they have been awarded a $14.1 million contract to provide a 4G network on the moon. So you might be thinking, well, who is there making telephone calls on the moon? Well, it's not really about that. It's providing a network for bits of infrastructure to talk to each other. So a Mars rover talking to a remote sensor type of thing. So they can now do that over a larger area on the moon. So it's a bit of a PR coup. The first external planet or moon, obviously, 4G network, when we're still struggling to get 3G in London, but there you go. Don't panic, this is not a thing. This is just a really good article that was posing a really interesting question I thought would be worth mentioning. So with cinema chains unfortunately struggling with COVID, and obviously people don't want to be in the same space together, let alone locked in a big room together, there are lots of ailing, and especially in America, cinema chains. So it might be right for somebody like Amazon to sweep in and buy them up. So again, it's all just an opinion piece basically, but it's very well put together and poses a few kind of interesting conundrums. So what would be in it for Amazon basically? Well, if you are a Prime customer, you can get discounted tickets. Of course you could. They also, by the way, have their own movie studio, so they would clearly prioritise their own movies, and which would kickstart their streaming later on when it actually came to essentially their own platform. So there's quite a lot in that right now, and who's got the biggest pockets at the moment? Well, people like Amazon. So interesting, watch that space basically. The impact of cloud gaming. So we've seen this big sort of move to cloud gaming. You've probably heard about these sort of, you don't need any hardware anymore. You can just play games through the internet on, basically you just play them through your handset and you just look at the video on whatever your device you've got, say a mobile phone. So you've got things like Google Stadia, those sorts of things. So this was a really interesting report about the actual environmental impact of these. So just because stuff is in the cloud, we sort of just go, oh, it's invisible and it doesn't take any resources. The cloud is just a whole bunch of servers, and they're sitting in a warehouse somewhere, whirring away 24/7. A huge amount of cooling is needed, etc., etc. So some really interesting facts about it, that even just US gaming platforms, just US, use 34 terawatt hours of electricity. So that's the same as West Virginia every year. So it's a huge, an entire state's worth of electricity. That's also pumping out the same as 5 million cars worth of CO2. So it's just the US gaming, so it's 5 million cars can be taken off the road if you stop playing games around. Also PC gaming is pretty big as well. So 25 power plants are needed just to power PC gaming. So you've got people like Microsoft who want to be carbon neutral by 2030, and Sony I think it's 2050. So they're still a little way out. So Google, have done this whole thing where they've made themselves Google carbon neutral already. You've got these other big giants saying it's going to be 10, maybe 30 years away. So you've got this double whammy going on at the moment. So you've still got to say a PlayStation 5 piece of hardware, which is going to take plastic and electronics and transport and all that sort of stuff. And most of the actual infrastructure is in the cloud. So you've got two big draws on it, whereas it used to be just be a piece of plastic and a disc, you'd stick it in the machine and away you go. And the rest of it is just kind of powering your TV and your console. So there's this kind of sort of seen, unspoken cost to the environment of cloud gaming. So something to watch. There are lots of interesting, this dark data that just sits on servers. You've probably got an old MySpace account which is sat on a server using electricity, so your sort of digital echo is actually costing the world its resources. So really interesting read, especially about gaming. Cybershoes, something a little bit lighter. Cybershoes. So there's the Omni One, which is a sort of a treadmill. You might have seen it. It's like a treadmill with a hoop, and you run on a treadmill, and you kind of shoot and all that sort of stuff in VR. So this is it's like the smaller brother, I guess, of that. A completely different company, but these are the Cybershoes. So if you've never used VR before to play a game or experience some sort of environment, then basically what you have to do is you have to use your handset, point somewhere and then press a button to teleport to that point. That's kind of the only real way you can run, unless the actual game has got a kind of a, you know, you use the thumb joystick or whatever it is to move left, right, up and down, but then that's usually what you use for doing stuff in the game. So this teleporting is just a bit of a pain. So these shoes, which I love it because it's, I can't remember what the price is, it's $269, and you get the little, what they call the cyber carpet as well, which I thought was brilliant as well. And if you spend about another $100, you get the gaming system, which also comes with the chair, which I assume is called a cyber chair. However, you know, it's just really interesting. It allows you to use your swivelly chair to navigate VR environments. So there you go. This is massive, okay. Well, it's massive if you're a sort of a nerd, but the future, this is huge. So semiconducting, you might have heard that phrase. It's a little bit like AI, it's just thrown around a bunch of times, but superconducting is when essentially a material can conduct electricity, let's say, without any resistance. So if an electron can go through a cable with no resistance, it's essentially you can put all the power down that cable you ever want and it will never lose any. So you go, well, okay, why is that interesting? Well, you can then, for all the power grid loses so much power as it's transferring electricity, that would disappear. You've got things like processors, computer processors. All of a sudden they're transferring electrons along those paths at infinite speeds, essentially. So, okay, superconductors, materials start superconducting at about close to absolute zero. So the ideal is, well, you can't have computers and mobile phones always kept at absolute zero. That would make no sense. So making them happen at room temperature has always been the holy grail. So they've managed to do it. It comes with a few drawbacks. If you did have a device that was superconducting with this new technology, it would have to be squashed by 2 diamonds at something like 3 million times the current air pressure around you. So basically there's a piece of material and then there's 2 very sharp diamonds that are pressing on it with 300 megapascals, I think it is. So huge amount of pressure to get this material to actually superconduct, but it does do it at about 16 degrees centigrade, so sort of a chilly room. However, this is massive news. But I won't go into it, but basically this has been the holy grail for many years, to say that we have done room temperature semiconducting, and now we have. So you won't see this really be practical probably in the next 20 years, but this is big news in science. Google's Journalist Studio has been announced. So this is a set of tools for journalists that basically allow them to do, well, it takes a lot of the legwork out of what they have to do. So there's some really interesting things you can see on your screen right now. It's got standard stuff like Google Trends, great, but it also has what's called pinpoint. So you can upload documents, handwritten notes, files, you can actually upload audio files, and it will actually go through them all and try and pinpoint anything that you want. So if you say there is something in these hidden notes somewhere, or redacted files, whatever, where are the bits that say this, it will find those for you as well. There's also fact check, which is brilliant. So if you go to the fact check, go on the link at the bottom, so journaliststudio.google.com, there's a fact check on there, and even just look at the things that have been recently fact checked. It's fascinating what people are fact checking, and also the fake news that's out there as well. And there's also the Common Knowledge project, which is in beta, as you can see there as well, which is where you basically, once you do have a something that you want to add to the community, you can add it, and therefore people can use it as well. So this is kind of common pooling of knowledge for journalists as well. So if you're in any way in the journalistic space, a writer, a researcher, then this is for you. You have to sign up to it, and it's for limited people, but go and do that. And then finally, Doom. So this is the 1993 classic Doom. I think I did actually play it in 1993. It blew my mind how cool it was. But it's now become this kind of meme of a sort of a, can you get Doom to run on ... So people have got it to run on Teslas, and they've even got it to run recently on a pregnancy test, a little digital pregnancy test. So this chap here on this YouTube, which was absolutely fascinating, a little bit of science, basically just said, like, you know, I haven't got the sort of technical nous to actually get it to run on a weird device, so I'm just going to try and power it using potatoes. So it's actually quite fascinating about how many potatoes do you need to actually run a scientific calculator running Doom on it. Really interesting video. I implore you to go and have a look at that. And with that, we are done. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next week.